Admiral Voraz stood at the center of the Imperial Fleet Command's bridge, staring at the holographic map hovering above the tactical table. He wasn't blinking. None of them were. Around him, decorated officers and analysts whispered nervously, as if speaking too loud might make the unknown vessel notice them. "Distance?" he asked, voice tight. 62,000 clicks from central perimeter, replied the sensor officer, antennae twitching with unease. But closing fast. Sir, it's not decelerating. Voraz turned toward the technician. You mean it's approaching at interstellar speeds and it hasn't initiated braking procedures? No braking, no communication, no signature, no origin marker. It just appeared. The Admiral's mouth dried up. That wasn't supposed to be possible. Every ship in the known galaxy had its signature encoded from launch. Empire law required it. Even pirates had enough sense to spoof signatures if they wanted to move unnoticed. But this ship wasn't spoofing anything. It was pure void, like the stars bent around its hull and refused to speak its name. Visual? He asked. The screen flashed, and for a moment, silence swept the entire command center. It was sleek. Not in the ornamental, over-designed way of Imperial warships, but in the purposeful, terrifying simplicity of something built to do only one thing. Its hull was matte black, so dark it almost hurt to look at. It glided like it didn't obey normal physics, carving through subspace as if space itself parted out of respect. Or fear. It's human, someone whispered. The word hung heavy in the air. Human. The Terrans. The ghosts of the Orion conflict. The race everyone believed was extinct. They had vanished 100 years ago. After the war. After the Battle of Jara. After the Empire scorched Earth's atmosphere and poisoned its colonies, declaring victory over a species that had dared to resist. The official record said the last Terran ship self-destructed rather than be captured. That was a century ago. And now, this. Voraz turned to his communications officer. Any attempt at contact? On all channels, no response, but what? The officer looked pale, an oddity for a species with green skin. Sir, it is transmitting, but not in our language. It's speaking Terran Standard. They all stared. Translate it. There was a long pause before a mechanical voice filled the bridge, cold and emotionless. You erased us. You silenced our children. Now we remember. Now we return. Every being in the room felt it, that creeping feeling down the spine, that chill of knowing the universe just got bigger and darker. This wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Voraz grabbed the side of the console. Scramble defense squadrons, activate planetary shields, alert the High Council. Another voice interrupted, one they hadn't authorized. The transmission cut through their encrypted systems like butter. It was human again, but this time it didn't sound machine-processed. It sounded angry. This is the SV Vengeance. No further warnings. Stand down or be dismantled. The communication ended. Silence again. Then the sensor officer croaked, It's speeding up! Panic bloomed. Voraz felt his heart lurch. No ship should be able to accelerate like that. Not at those speeds. Not so close to a major system. But this one was breaking every rule of known space. One of the junior analysts screamed, It just bypassed our perimeter cannons. Sir, they didn't even fire. The AI is refusing to target it. What? They say it's not a recognized enemy. They say the ship doesn't exist. They can't lock onto it. The Admiral stared at the screen. The ghost ship was now just one jump away from Corvallis Prime, the Empire's capital planet. He leaned forward, the weight of realization crashing down. They're back, he whispered. The Terrans are back. Alarms screamed across the corridors of Corvallis Prime's orbital defense ring. 1,000 sirens echoed through steel and stone, signaling the unthinkable, breach imminent. Officers scrambled to battle stations, fleet drones lit up in red, and civilians, oblivious moments ago, now stared up into the sky as planetary shields began shimmering into visibility. Inside the High Council's panic chamber, Chancellor Meru slammed her fist against the armrest of her throne seat. "One Terran ship? And you're telling me it's bypassed 5 fleets, 3 defense rings, and the entire outer perimeter in less than 2 hours?" General Talek, a leathery-skinned brute with battle medals hanging from every inch of his jacket, bowed slightly. "Chancellor, we don't understand how. Our AI fire control systems won't even recognize the ship as a target. It's like it's invisible. Technically speaking, it's not there." "And yet," she snapped, "it's very clearly there." He didn't respond. What could he say? That the Empire, with all its might, its centuries of domination, was now facing an enemy it didn't even know how to perceive? Another advisor, pale and shaking, spoke from behind a datapad. "Ma'am, there's more. We just received a transmission from our deep archive vault. It wasn't sent from the Terran ship, but it activated as soon as it arrived within system range." Meru raised an eyebrow. "Deep archive? Those aren't even connected to the grid." "I know," the advisor whispered. "But this one had a Terran backdoor. We believe it was embedded during the Jara conflict and has been dormant for the past 98 years. She stared at him. "And what does this transmission say?" He hesitated. "It's a voice recording, from a human, a captain named—" He glanced down again. "Captain Rourke." The room went still. Chancellor Meru sat back, stunned. That name was infamous. A war criminal in the Empire's records. A human naval commander who'd orchestrated multiple strikes against Imperial outposts during the war. They had officially declared him dead after Jara, another ghost. "Play it," she demanded. The room filled with static, and then a deep voice, human, calm and slow. "To the Empire, you taught us that mercy was weakness. You taught us that silence meant safety. You burned our skies, buried our cities. We are what you made us." A pause. "This message is for the one who pressed the button. Chancellor Meru of the Valis Ascendancy. We remember your face." Everyone turned to her. The Chancellor's mouth trembled just for a second. She had been a junior officer then, back when she authorized the release of the final Radiance bomb on Earth's upper hemisphere. She told herself it was the only option, that the Terrans would have wiped them out if they hadn't struck first. "I was following orders," she muttered. General Talek looked at her. "He doesn't care." Suddenly, all system lights blinked red. A voice, a different one, mechanical and cold, spoke over their comm systems. "Core defense grid compromised, Sector 0 breached, outer shields down, unauthorized landing detected on upper spire deck." Talek barked. "What? How?" Another officer burst in, panting. "Ma'am, something is on the planet. The Terran ship deployed something. A small object. It descended fast, straight through the atmosphere, and it didn't trigger any alarms. We didn't even see it." "Where is it now?" "Upper spire. It's walking." "Walking?" Meru echoed. It's not organic, Chancellor. It's a machine. Or a suit. Some kind of Terran drop unit, fully autonomous. It looks old, but it's slicing through Imperial Guard like nothing." They pulled up live footage from the security feeds. At first, all they saw was a blur. Then it resolved. A black figure, humanoid in form but standing nearly 9 feet tall, its armor jagged and burned. It moved with terrifying purpose, and everywhere it went, the feed cut out seconds after. On its chest, 2 white letters still glowed faintly through the scars. SV. "The ship's name," Meru whispered. "SV Vengeance." Then the figure paused in the corridor and looked straight into the nearest security camera. A voice came through again. Different this time. Less broadcast, more direct. "Chancellor Meru, you buried my family. I came to return the favor. And then the feed died. For the first time in 50 years, the Empire realized what fear really felt like. The emergency lights bathed the corridor in a deep red glow, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Each flash revealed more carnage. Imperial soldiers, some vaporized, others crumpled in their armor, lay scattered like broken dolls. The sound of metal on metal echoed down the marble floors as the Terran machine walked forward, step by deliberate step. It wasn't fast. It didn't have to be. It was death on legs, and death didn't need to rush. Chancellor Meru had been evacuated to the inner vault, the most secure bunker on Corvallis Prime. 10 meters of reinforced neutronium walls, a defense grid with its own internal power core. No one had breached it in 600 years, but she didn't feel safe. General Talek stood by the vault's primary interface, barking orders. Lock down every service shaft. Reroute all auxiliary power to internal countermeasures. Deploy the Iron Guard, all of them. An aide stammered, Sir, the Iron Guard hasn't been fully activated and— I don't care! Wake them up! Talek's voice cracked as he slammed his fist against the control console. Sweat dripped from his temples, and even his hardened features couldn't hide the terror eating at him. He had seen war. He'd led the bombardment of 9 rebel planets. He'd broken sieges, crushed uprisings, vaporized entire species into footnotes. But this was different. The footage they'd seen, what little was left, showed that nothing slowed the Terran unit. It ignored blaster fire, walked through force fields, melted titanium with its bare hands. "Where's the vengeance now?" Meru asked from behind him. Talek didn't answer right away. He stared at the datapad, waiting for an update. Finally, a new map loaded. The red blip was inside the palace perimeter. 2 floors below us, he said quietly. The Chancellor swallowed hard. "It's hunting me, isn't it?" Talek looked at her, expression unreadable. "It's not just here for revenge. It's making a statement." "To who?" "To everyone," he muttered. "To the galaxy." A shrill alarm sounded, then a voice, robotic but panicked. An artificial system they all trusted, spoke in broken cadence. "Unauthorized presence. Detected. Upper vault security breached. Threat level maximum. Life expectancy severely limited." The Iron Guard had assembled outside the vault entrance. 12 towering machines, each forged in the darkest military labs of the Empire. They had no hearts, no minds, only kill protocols. They'd been created for war, to level cities when diplomacy failed. Each one cost more than a destroyer-class starship. They were the Empire's last resort. And they were all pointed at the corridor where the Terran intruder would soon arrive. Inside the vault, the atmosphere was suffocating. The hum of power cycling into the defensive array made the floor vibrate. Meru stared at the door, arms trembling. "How is this even happening?" she whispered. "They're supposed to be extinct." "They adapted," Talek said. "They always do. You remember what we said back then? The old saying during the war?" Meru nodded slowly. "Terrans break, but first they learn how to break you." Suddenly the lights outside went out, not dimmed, not flickered. They died, complete darkness. And then, the faint distant sound of metal boots on stone. Clink, clink, clink. One Iron Guard opened fire early, sensing movement. Plasma bolts ripped down the corridor, then something flew back in response. Fast, sharp. It was the Iron Guard's head. The other 11 opened fire immediately. Their combined energy output could cut through a moon's crust. Then silence. No screams, no sounds of battle, just silence. Seconds ticked by. Then came a sound, something dragging. One of the guards, the last one, was pulled into view, its frame crushed inward like an imploded canister. Something had torn through its armor like paper. Its glowing red eye flickered once, then died. A voice came next, calm, cold, human. "You built gods. We built the god killers." The vault door shuddered. Meru stepped back instinctively. "It can't get through. That door's impenetrable." Talek didn't reply. The door bent inward with a metallic groan. Not cut, not bypassed. Bent, like something on the other side was pressing with enormous force. Another push. The wall cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. Screams echoed through the comms from distant floors. Guards abandoning posts. Officers begging for evacuation shuttles. Then, suddenly, the bending stopped. A new voice came through. Not over speakers. It was in her ear, her implant, the one only the High Command could access. "You killed our world. Now we'll show you what a dead world can do." And then the Palace AI lit up with an override command. "SV Vengeance has initiated planetary blackout protocol." All power across Corvallis Prime began to die. Shields, weapons, communications, and up in orbit a second Terran ship decloaked. Above Corvallis Prime, space warped. For a few long, silent seconds, it looked like a tear in reality. Stars bending around the disturbance, light itself hesitating before touching it. Then the cloak fell, and the second Terran vessel emerged in full view. If the SV Vengeance was sleek and terrifying in its simplicity, this one was worse. It was jagged, scarred, almost stitched together like something rebuilt in desperation. Its hull bore no insignia, no name, just a long line of symbols scorched into the side like tally marks, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The Imperial observation officers stared in disbelief as readings poured into their consoles. No registration, no AI interface, hull composition unknown. Mass displacement doesn't match physical size. How is it even flying? "It's not flying," another officer muttered. "It's drifting like it doesn't care about physics at all." "What class is it?" No one answered. The database had nothing. This ship wasn't just not recorded. It was deliberately built to be impossible. One of the officers whispered what they were all thinking. "It's not a ship. It's a graveyard with engines." Back on the surface, in the darkness of the Capitol's vault chamber, Chancellor Meru and General Talek were frozen as the last flickers of auxiliary power struggled to stay alive. Emergency lighting failed, communication links dropped, and the once invincible vault door now looked like paper against the storm knocking outside. Then the second message came. Broadcasted system-wide, on every device, every screen, every neural implant. "Your empire is built on ash. We are the embers you left behind, and now we burn." The second Terran ship opened its side panels. Not weapons, pods, thousands of them. Small, coffin-shaped vessels streaked across the sky, breaching the atmosphere like meteors. Some hit the oceans, others landed in the forests, cities, and mountains. Each carried something, someone. Terrans, not all human, not anymore. Modified, hardened, built by pain, by time, by war. Men and women who had survived the annihilation of Earth and rebuilt in places the Empire never thought to look, deep in abandoned systems, in artificial habitats, hiding in shadows of stars the Empire considered dead. They had waited a century. Now, they were here. Inside the vault, the Chancellor clutched her head. The transmission was still ringing in her mind. "They're going to tear us apart." General Talek paced, hand on his sidearm. "We underestimated them. We always did. We thought the Terrans were fragile because they bled easy. We thought killing their world was the end." "They were supposed to be extinct," she whispered. "No," Talek said, turning to her with something dark in his eyes. "They just went feral." The vault trembled again, this time not from an outside force, but from below. Shockwaves traveled up the floor, explosions. the kind that meant surface breaches. Suddenly, one of the backup screens sparked to life, flickering between static and a shaky drone feed. The Chancellor leaned in. One of the pods had landed just a few miles away. The video showed black figures spilling from the wreckage, soldiers with no identifiable armor patterns, their weapons unlike anything seen in the current era. Not plasma, not rail, something older, raw, chemical-based, and devastating. The soldiers moved in coordinated silence, sweeping through streets and vaporizing anything in uniform. Not one of them spoke, not one of them hesitated. Civilians weren't touched, only military targets were torn apart. "This isn't a strike," Talek said grimly. "It's an extermination." Then something even more terrifying happened. One of the drones picked up an image of a Terran soldier pulling a small child from the rubble of a collapsed building. An Imperial child. The soldier knelt, spoke softly, gave the child water, shielded them from falling debris. Talek stared at the feed. Why would they do that?" Meru's voice cracked. "Because we wouldn't." It was then they understood. The Terrans weren't just here to kill. They were here to remind the galaxy what the Empire had become. On the outskirts of Corvallis Prime, as resistance crumbled and the night sky rained with falling pods, the people looked up and saw the impossible. 2 ships, no origin, no records, and a symbol glowing in the dark sky, etched in holographic fire above the city. "We remember Earth." The streets of Corvallis Prime were no longer silent. They roared with the chaos of war, the kind of war the Empire hadn't seen in centuries, not since the Jara campaign, not since Earth. But this wasn't a battle between evenly matched forces. This was something else entirely. This was retribution. The Terran ground forces moved like they'd trained for this day their whole lives. Maybe they had. Their armor was mismatched, scarred, modified beyond recognition. But what they lacked in uniformity, they made up for in purpose. Every step was precise, every shot was personal, and they weren't just attacking military installations. They were targeting systems, power grids, comms relays, broadcast towers. They were cutting the Empire's eyes and ears out of its own skull. General Talek watched the carnage from the last functioning tactical feed inside the vault. "They're not here to conquer. They're here to erase us." He was right. All over the capital, Imperial soldiers fell back, only to find they had nowhere left to retreat. Air support had been grounded. Drones refused to launch. The Terran ships were jamming protocols the Empire hadn't used in over 100 years. Archaic, brutal code that bypassed sleek AI firewalls like slicing through fabric. The Empire had gotten soft, comfortable, arrogant. And now they were being undone by the very people they once dismissed as savages. In the marketplace plaza, a squad of Imperial guards took cover behind a fountain, trying to hold back a group of Terrans advancing from the east. Their leader, a young commander named Rel, shouted for reinforcements, but none came. His comm was dead. His HUD kept flashing an error. The Terrans didn't speak. They didn't bark orders. They just moved, weaving through debris, firing only when needed, conserving energy like they'd done this 1,000 times before. One of them, taller than the others, walked right into enemy fire like it didn't matter. And it didn't. Rel hit him dead center with a plasma burst. Nothing. The figure kept walking, raised a rifle that looked handmade, and fired once. Rel's second-in-command dropped instantly. One shot, no second chances. Panic set in. These weren't soldiers. They were something else. And then came the broadcast. Not a transmission, not a message. A memory. The Terran ships had hijacked the Empire's planetary signal arrays and were streaming historical data to every screen, every implant, every public board. Footage of Earth during the final days. Burning skies, dying oceans, children screaming under black clouds, Empire warships blotting out the sun as they fired radiation bombs across continents. And then, the final message of Earth's planetary governor before transmission was lost. To any Terran who finds this, they came in peace, they offered lies, we bent the knee, and they burned our planet anyway. If you're hearing this, make them remember. The people of Corvallis watched in horror. Some broke down, some screamed, some turned on their own commanders. The truth was a weapon, and the Terrans were wielding it with as much precision as their rifles. Back in the vault, Meru collapsed into her seat, trembling. They're not just fighting us, they're shattering our history, our story, everything we built on their ashes. She couldn't finish. Talek stood at the door, weapon drawn, eyes locked on the final line of defense. Boom. The vault's inner corridor shook, a blast louder than any before. The lights flickered one last time, then went dark completely. One of the guards whispered, "It's here." Then came the voice. "You buried the truth. We dug it up." The vault door buckled. Again. And again. Then it peeled backward, peeled like paper in a child's hands. Smoke and sparks filled the room, and through it, the Terran walked in. 9 feet tall, black armor burned and scorched, a weapon in one hand, a banner in the other. He planted the banner at the vault entrance, a simple flag, torn but unmistakable. The old Earth insignia, blue and white, forgotten, erased, now burning into the floor of the Empire's heart. Talek raised his weapon. The Terran didn't flinch. "I was there," Talek growled. "I stood on the bridge when we ordered your skies burned. We did what we had to do." The Terran stepped forward. "So will I." A single shot rang out. Talek dropped. Meru screamed, backing away, tears streaking down her face. "Please. I didn't know what they'd do to your world. I was young." The Terran turned to her, weapon lowered. "You don't get to die yet. You get to watch." Outside, the sky above Corvallis turned red, and the old voice echoed again across every system. "Earth was forgotten, but we never forgot you." The red sky stretched over Corvallis Prime like a bleeding wound. From orbit, the 2 Terran vessels, SV Vengeance and the unnamed Juggernaut, hovered in synchronized silence. They weren't broadcasting anymore. They didn't need to. The message had already sunk in. Across every major city on the planet, the transmissions continued looping. Earth's final moments, children dying in radiation storms, cities crumbling beneath orbital fire, and the calm voice of the Terran governor whispering a promise to the future. But now, something more terrifying than violence had begun. Dissent. In every corner of the Empire, citizens were turning on their leaders. The feeds had reached the outer colonies, the mid-world rings, even the distant moons of Izari Prime, where anti-Empire whispers had lived quietly for decades. Now those whispers had turned into roars. Massive protests erupted in Imperial-aligned systems, and across the interstellar net, a hashtag surged back to life, a phrase last seen during the Jara War. Earth was real. The Empire had buried Earth's story, rewritten it, told the galaxy they had to eliminate a dangerous species for peace. Told them the Terrans destroyed themselves. Now the truth was seared into every screen, playing on loop, impossible to unsee. And across the stars, something fractured. Whole battalions defected. Entire fleets turned off their transponders and went dark, unwilling to be the next to face those black Terran ships. Some rebel cells even tried to contact the Terrans directly, begging to join them, to apologize, to fight the Empire from within. But the Terrans didn't respond. They weren't here to form alliances. They were here to burn rot. Inside the ruined capital of Corvallis Prime, Chancellor Meru was marched through the hallways of her own palace by a Terran escort. 2 of them flanked her, 1 male, 1 female, their faces hidden, but their silence screamed louder than anything. Her hands were bound, her face bruised, and everywhere she looked, she saw the consequences of her past. Scorch marks on walls, corpses of guards she'd trained, her marble statues shattered on the floor. The male Terran finally spoke as they entered what had once been the throne chamber. "You watched Earth die from this room, didn't you?" She said nothing. The Terran turned, grabbing her by the collar, lifting her off her feet like she weighed nothing. His visor reflected her terrified face. "We remember. Every second. Every scream. You counted our deaths in your reports like they were data." He dropped her. She hit the floor, coughing, gasping. "Why not kill me?" she croaked. "You've already taken the planet." The female Terran stepped forward, calm, voice flat. "You don't understand. We didn't come here to take your planet." She raised a small device and pressed it. A holographic projection flared to life above them, images of the outer colonies, the border worlds, the forgotten systems the Empire had drained and abandoned. And then, flickering between them, uprisings, real-time footage, cities turning on local governors, imperial buildings set ablaze, soldiers tearing off uniforms, banners falling. Meru's eyes widened. "What have you done?" The female Terran leaned in, her voice cold and steady. "We turned your truth against you. We didn't come to conquer. We came to infect." She turned toward the projection and pressed a second button. Now the screen showed an entirely different kind of horror. Terran colonies. Dozens. Hundreds. Hidden. Buried. Functional. They weren't extinct. They'd thrived. Built civilizations on asteroids. Harnessed energy from dead stars. Mastered technology that bent the laws of physics. They hadn't just survived. They'd evolved. "You thought you ended us," the male Terran said, voice thick with rage barely contained. "All you did was push us underground long enough to become your reckoning." Then the doors of the throne room swung open, and the first wave of civilians entered. Corvallis Prime citizens, journalists, diplomats, refugees, all of them escorted by Terrans, not prisoners, witnesses. Meru tried to rise. "What is this?" The female Terran didn't look at her. "This is where your empire ends." The throne, her throne, was pulled from its foundation and shattered in front of everyone. A new seat was placed in its place. Smaller, simpler, no gold, no jewels, just metal, scorched and sharp. One of the Terrans sat down, not as ruler, as a reminder. Across the galaxy people watched, not just the fall of a capital, but the rise of a reckoning, and above it all, one final message from the SV Vengeance. You erased Earth. But Earth was never a place. Earth was a people, and we are everywhere now. The news of Corvallis Prime's fall spread faster than light. Not because of official broadcasts. The Empire's network had collapsed hours ago, but because the Terrans had seen to it that everyone saw it. They hijacked pirate relays, repurposed old rebel beacons, and used deep-frequency pulses to send compressed signals across wormhole-linked systems. By dawn, if it could be called that on any of the dim-lit colony worlds, every outer rim station, fringe planet, and deep space trading port had seen it. The throne of the Empire shattering. The Chancellor of the Ascendancy on her knees, a Terran voice declaring, "We are everywhere now." It didn't matter what species you were. The message hit the same. The untouchable had been touched. The invincible had bled. But not everyone bowed. On Vakaris 4, a fortress world and one of the last loyalist strongholds in the mid-sector, Grand Moff Kale stood watching the footage from inside his war bunker. Tall, pale, half his body replaced with cybernetics from a long-forgotten campaign, Kyle didn't flinch. He didn't rage. He smiled. "Finally," he muttered, "a worthy enemy returns." Behind him, his generals shifted uneasily. "Sir, we just lost 3 border fleets to defection," one of them said. "Even our own AI clusters are hesitating to engage the Terran frequencies. Some are flagging them as cultural trauma triggers." Kyle turned. "Then purge the AI clusters. But purge them." The general swallowed and obeyed. Kyle turned back to the screen, narrowing his eyes at the image of the SV Vengeance, still hovering above Corvallis Prime. "They think this ends with a speech and a shattered chair. Number, this is the beginning." He tapped his wrist. A console opened, revealing a vault sequence long sealed, a protocol not even the High Council had dared use. Protocol Lazarus 9, an ancient contingency, designed not to win, but to erase. "They want to show us what they've become?" Kyle said to himself. "Let's remind them what we buried deeper than Earth." Meanwhile, back on Corvallis Prime, the Terrans were already planning their next move. The throne room had become a command hub, no longer a symbol of rule, but of reclamation. In its center, the surviving leaders of the Terran resurgence gathered, officers, tacticians, survivors of Black Ops projects long considered dead. They spoke quietly, with precision, and without ego. "We've received signals from 8 more colonies asking for support," one of them reported. "Some are already tearing down their garrisons without a fight." Another added, "Vacaris 4 hasn't moved yet, but Kale's alive, and if anyone's capable of rallying what's left of the Loyalists, he'll try to make a final stand," the lead Terran strategist said. "No doubt. And he'll use the darkest parts of the Empire to do it." The room grew quiet. One figure leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Smaller than the others, cloaked in a dusty gray coat with an old Terran patch on the sleeve. She spoke quietly. "We should have killed Kale a century ago." The lead strategist turned. "You knew him?" "I served with him, before Earth burned, before he sold us out." They all looked at her now. She pulled the hood down. Scars traced her jaw. Her left eye glowed faint blue, a cybernetic replacement. "He was part of Project Winterborn, same as me. Only he got greedy, switched sides, helped them finish us off." She pointed to the glowing holomap now showing Vacaris 4. "I'll lead the strike." Another Terran hesitated. "It's suicide." She didn't blink. "It's closure." The strategist nodded. Above them, the SV Vengeance began powering its core drive. Not for war, for travel. Destination, Vacaris 4. But as they prepared to leave, something strange happened. The second Terran ship, the one with no name, the one that hadn't spoken, shifted position. Its hull glowed red for the first time. And from it, another transmission flared. Not to Corvallis, not to the Terrans, but to Kale. Somehow they knew. Deep within the icy chambers of Vacaris IV, Kale received the message. He opened it in isolation. No encryption, no trickery, just a simple voice, familiar, human, cold. "We remember you, Kale. We remember the children you locked in cryotubes. We remember the weapons you tested on your own species. You survived Earth's fall. But Earth survived you." The message ended. Kyle stood still for a moment. Then he laughed, a hollow robotic sound. "They think they can judge me?" he said aloud. He opened the vault. Inside, rows of glass chambers hissed to life, each one containing something worse than death. Soldiers groan in silence. Bioweapons, artificial minds created in the final hours of Earth to fight the very thing the Empire feared most. Human rage. Kyle whispered, Let's see how well they remember hell. Space over Vakaris 4 was unnaturally still. No trade ships, no patrols, no civilian traffic, just the oppressive silence of something ancient about to wake. From orbit, the SV Vengeance drifted into low position, shadowing the icy mountain range that crowned the planet's northern hemisphere. Its weapons were silent, its engines cold, but the presence of it, the weight, could be felt across every comm line, every neural implant tuned to its signal. Inside the ship, Terran operatives made final checks. Most said nothing. What could they say? This wasn't just a mission, it was the last page of a 100-year-old nightmare. A chapter sealed in ash, finally about to be closed. In the strike room, she stood alone. The woman in gray. The one who had once served beside Kyle, who had watched Earth burn and lived long enough to watch the Empire crawl from the ashes wearing a crown built on bones. Her name had been erased long ago, but her designation remained. Wraith 9. She loaded her weapon, an old kinetic rifle, polished but worn from years in exile. It had no smart systems, no auto-aim, no AI, just her hands, and the promise she made when the sky turned red over her home planet. I'll be the last thing he sees. The doors opened. The Terran command strategist nodded. The drop point is ready. She stepped in without a word. Moments later, her pod burst from the belly of vengeance like a silent comet. On Vakaris 4, Kale stood in the heart of his fortress, deep beneath the ice. He was no longer just cybernetic. He had gone beyond, grafted with void tech, surrounded by machines that pulsed with the stolen genetic code of dead Terran soldiers. Around him stood the Lazarus Guard, failures of old Terran resurrection projects the Empire had stolen and twisted, hulking, half-living, screaming without mouths. He smiled. "They'll send her," he muttered. "She always finishes what the others start." His throne, if it could be called that, was wired into the planet's crust. He controlled the defense grid, the climate weapon array, even the experimental AI buried beneath the frozen soil. He had prepared for every kind of war, except the one that walked in on 2 feet and carried nothing but silence and a rifle. The drop pod landed hard, cracking ice and sending vapor into the air. Wraith 9 emerged with her weapon drawn, sensors scanning. The cold didn't touch her. The wind didn't distract her. She moved fast through the outer perimeter, leaving the first outpost in flames behind her. Kyle's voice followed her in every corridor. He didn't scream. He whispered, like a lover from another life. "You remember what I taught you? Efficiency. Silence. Mercy is wasteful." She kept walking. "You survived Earth, Wraith, but you lost everything because of your hesitation." Another squad of Lazarus beasts came barreling toward her down a narrow shaft. She dropped to one knee and fired twice. Heads exploded, bodies slammed into walls. She didn't flinch. "Still no hesitation," Kyle whispered. "Good." The inner sanctum was dim. Kyle stood at the center, arms spread like a priest waiting for absolution. Tubes pulsed with stolen Terran DNA, old memories held in synthetic cells. A monument to his obsession. Wraith 9 stepped inside, slowly, rifle lowered but ready. He turned. "I tried to save us," Kyle said, "but they chose pride. They chose Earth. I chose evolution. You chose power," she said softly. "And then you chose to burn the rest." He smirked. "Do you really think you can kill me? Look around you. I've uploaded myself into the architecture of this moon. I am this world." "Then I'll kill the world." She raised the rifle. He lunged, faster than he should have been, modified legs launching him forward, a blade extending from his wrist. But she wasn't aiming for him. She shot the tube behind him. A burst of chemical plasma erupted, washing him in fire and light. He screamed, half machine, half man, and all of it burning. She charged through the smoke, jammed the rifle to his chest, and whispered, "For Earth," then pulled the trigger. Outside, the ground cracked. The fortress began to collapse into the frozen abyss, and above, the SV Vengeance picked up a signal. One word. Done. They didn't wait. Orbital engines fired. The unnamed Terran dreadnought descended in silence, and then with no sound but raw energy, it fired its core. Vicari's 4's surface imploded. No explosion, just sudden, pure silence, as if the entire planet had been deleted from existence. Weeks later, in a neutral zone near the galactic fringe, a message played across every channel. The Empire has fallen. Its tools of oppression are buried. Earth's children are not conquerors. We are witnesses, and we have not forgotten. Let this be the last time anyone burns a world to feel powerful. The screen cut to black, and then only a symbol remained. A blue and white circle. The old Earth. Remembered. The message wasn't meant for humans. Thousands of light years away from Earth, buried under layers of foreign encryption and deep space static, a single, broken distress call pulsed faintly across the galaxy. It was ancient, desperate, and it wasn't in any language ever recorded by humanity. It bounced through the void for decades, passing silent gas giants, the graves of dead stars, and the watchful eyes of civilizations far older than Earth itself. And yet, no one answered. Until it reached the edge of Sol system. The call was weak, fractured beyond repair by cosmic radiation and the indifference of time. But it was caught by a deep space listening post in the asteroid belt, an old, half-forgotten relic of Earth's cold galactic era. The AI that operated the array, Argus, had been running autonomously for years. Bored, some might say, if boredom were something machines could feel. But Argus was always listening, always watching. The signal came in at 3:42 a.m., Earth Standard Time. Argus did something strange. It didn't log it. It didn't classify or file it away. It forwarded the signal directly to Earth, to one specific inbox. Dr. Mara Ellison had not slept properly in 3 weeks. She lived in a tiny, windowless room deep beneath the United Nations Space Command complex in Geneva, surrounded by data streams, blinking consoles, and a haze of synthetic caffeine. Her job? Translate alien languages, or at least try to. Most of the time it was just static or nonsense, radio echoes, garbled messes. This was different. The moment the signal appeared on her screen, she froze. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly. There was a rhythm to the message, almost like speech. It wasn't any known galactic dialect, but it felt alive, like someone, or something, was still trying to reach out. She ran it through the standard decryption algorithms. Nothing. She ran it through the adaptive neural linguistic model designed to crack alien languages. Still nothing. So she tried something unorthodox. She let it play through speakers. And what she heard chilled her blood. It was screaming. Not loud, not chaotic, but desperate. Layered under the static, almost like a chorus of voices, pleading, wailing. There were words buried in it, or at least shapes that resembled speech. But there was more. Pain, fear, an overwhelming sense of wrongness. It didn't matter that she couldn't understand the language. She understood the feeling. Whoever had sent this signal was dying. Or worse, trapped in something so horrific that death might have been a mercy. She recorded it and immediately flagged it for emergency review. She barely had time to sit back before her screen went black. A symbol appeared, a blood-red triangle with an eye in the center. Classified, level black. Within 15 minutes, Mara was dragged from her office by a pair of UNSC guards and escorted to an orbital cruiser. They said nothing. She didn't ask. She knew better. Her stomach turned as they broke through Earth's atmosphere, leaving behind the blue calm of the only home she'd ever known. They took her to Vigilance, the UNSC's most powerful deep space exploration vessel, cloaked in stealth plating and bristling with experimental tech. But this time, it wasn't exploring. It was hunting. Admiral Rourke stood in the command chamber, back straight, arms clasped behind him. He was a relic of Earth's last great war, a war that ended with humanity realizing it was not alone. "We've decoded enough of the message to know it's a trap," he said without ceremony. "Someone or something wants to lure a ship to those coordinates. Every known civilization that received it ignored it. You know why?" Mara shook her head. "Because they're terrified of whatever's out there." She blinked. "Then, why are we going?" He turned to her then, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something human behind his eyes. Not fear, not duty, rage. "Because we're not like them. We don't ignore screams in the dark. We answer them." The engines roared to life, and Earth vanished behind them. The stars opened up like a mouth, ready to swallow them whole. And at the edge of the galaxy, something ancient stirred. It had been waiting, but not for aliens, not for diplomacy. It had been waiting for humans. The silence of deep space was never truly silent. Out there, beyond the humming of engines and the steady pulse of a ship's life support, there was something else, a pressure, a weight that pressed against the mind, even when nothing could be seen. The crew of Vigilance felt it more the further they traveled from Seoul. Dr. Mara Ellison sat in her observation room, staring out the reinforced glass panel as stars drifted like frozen fireflies in the dark. They were 5 days into the journey, 5 days closer to whatever sent that call. She hadn't slept well. No one had. Nightmares spread like infection. One engineer had woken up screaming about hands clawing through the walls. Another claimed he heard whispers in the water pipes, even though the ship had no liquid plumbing. Rourke kept the crew busy. Drills, patrols, systems checks. But even he couldn't keep their minds from wandering. Humanity had sent expeditions into deep space before. Some came back, some didn't. But this was different. They were heading into a sector the rest of the galaxy had marked as cursed. Not even pirates dared drift this far. Mara had spent most of the trip trying to decode more of the signal, but it was layered. Each time she peeled back a fragment, more confusion spilled out. What looked like data suddenly turned into sound. What sounded like language turned into emotion. It wasn't just a message. It was alive, morphing, adapting, watching her. Then came the anomaly. It appeared without warning, a black smear across the stars, like someone had dragged a brush of darkness across the galaxy. No light reflected from it. No data bounced back. It wasn't on any map. Rourke ordered the ship to slow, approaching with caution. As they drew closer, it became clear. It wasn't a natural void. It was shaped, engineered. A space station, massive and ancient, floated inside the anomaly. Dead, silent, and covered in symbols no one recognized. It spun slowly, as if waiting. The signal's origin point was locked in its core. The Admiral called a meeting. "We don't board until we understand what we're dealing with," he said, arms folded. "This could be a trap, a weapon, maybe worse." "But what if it's not?" Mara spoke, surprising herself. "What if someone really needs help?" Rourke's jaw clenched. "Then we still go in with guns drawn." The boarding team was assembled, 6 Marines in hardened exosuits, 2 engineers, a field medic, and Mara. Rourke insisted she go, despite her protests. "You're the only one who's heard the signal fully," he told her. "If it changes, we need you to hear it." They docked with the station's outer ring. The airlock groaned like something alive. As they stepped inside, flashlights cut through the dark, illuminating endless halls of strange metal, black, oily, and covered in what looked like veins. No bodies, no bones, just emptiness. And then the doors sealed behind them. No warning, no malfunction, just the soft, metallic click of finality. The station shifted. A deep vibration hummed beneath their boots. Lights flickered on, soft, blue-white, like stars trapped in glass. The Marines raised their weapons, scanning every corner, every shadow. Then the walls began to whisper. Not in English, not in any known tongue. But they understood. They spoke of pain. They spoke of betrayal. They spoke of something that had been unleashed. Mara's knees buckled as the whispers grew louder in her mind. Not through her ears, but directly into her thoughts. Images burst behind her eyes. Creatures, vast and writhing, born not of flesh but thought. Beings that had existed before galaxies spun. And one message repeated again and again. You are not ready. You were never meant to find this. One of the Marines, Carter, started to scream. He tore off his helmet, clutching his face. Blood poured from his nose and ears. Then another collapsed. Then another. Within seconds, 3 were down. Abort! Rourke's voice cracked over the comm. Get out now! But it was too late. The hallway ahead twisted, literally twisted, bending reality as it morphed into a spiral of black glass. Gravity shifted sideways. Time staggered. And from the far end of the hall, a light emerged. Not warm, not kind. A piercing beam of alien hate. They had triggered something. Something that did not want to be found. And humanity's arrival had awoken it. Mara tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, smothered by pressure that felt like it came from inside her own skull. Her vision blurred, her pulse thundered in her ears, and still that light at the end of the corridor burned brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Cold, ancient, malevolent. 2 of the Marines lay dead. Their bodies twitched unnaturally, as though something unseen was puppeting their nerves even in death. The medic, Alvarez, rushed to the 3rd, but stopped cold, his eyes widening. He looked back at Mara, his voice trembling. They're empty. Their insides are gone. Organs, bones, just gone. The surviving Marines, Henders and Saito, were losing it. Henders muttered prayers under his breath, while Saito stood frozen, weapon aimed at the twisting corridor that no longer obeyed physics. This place isn't real, he said quietly. This whole station, it's thinking, watching us. Mara didn't argue. She couldn't. Because in that moment she heard it again, the signal, not through comms, not from the speakers, directly in her mind. Only now it wasn't distorted. It wasn't screaming. It was speaking. You are the first to come. You are the last to leave. Your curiosity will be your undoing. And then it showed her. Images, flashes, memories that weren't hers. An alien species, tall and crystalline, with minds that spanned time like rivers. They had discovered something buried beneath the folds of space. A rift, a voice in the dark offering power, knowledge, escape from death. They listened, and one by one, they were unmade, not destroyed, rewritten. Their bodies lived on, but their minds became hosts, hosts for something older than time, a sickness of thought, a parasite of will. The last of their kind had built this station, not as a refuge, but as a tomb, a warning, a lock, and humanity had just picked it. The lights in the corridor shifted again, this time dimming to a deep, throbbing red. Sirens blared through the halls in patterns no one could recognize. Shapes moved in the shadows, long, spindly figures that flickered in and out like broken film. We need to get out, now! Henders snapped, grabbing Mara by the arm and pulling her toward the docking bay. But the path had changed. The station had rearranged itself. The door that once led back now opened to a massive chamber, round, smooth, humming with energy. At its center stood a single pedestal, and atop it hovered a sphere of liquid light, rotating slowly in place. It called to her. She stepped forward, ignoring Henders's shouts. The closer she got, the more her mind quieted. The fear slipped away. The whispering stopped. There was only truth. She touched the sphere, and the universe cracked. In an instant, she saw Earth, from above, from beneath, from timelines that never happened. She saw herself living 1,000 lives. She saw humanity's wars, its broken promises, its brilliance, its cruelty. She saw the other civilizations, proud, vast empires that turned their backs on the signal. And she saw why. Because it didn't just call for help. It called for a replacement. Something needed a new body, a new voice, a vessel. And humanity, curious, defiant, emotional, was perfect. The sphere vanished. The chamber began to collapse. Alarms screamed as the metal walls folded inward like dying petals. The surviving crew grabbed Mara and ran, dragging her through narrowing corridors as the station began to devour itself. Rourke's voice shouted through comms. "The station's destabilizing! We're pulling you out! Cut through the maintenance shaft!" They did. Henders used a plasma cutter to tear open a panel, and one by one, they crawled through the narrow space as the world behind them crumbled. When they burst back into the docking port, the corridor behind them was gone. Only darkness remained. They launched back to vigilance just as the station imploded into a singular point of black fire. And then silence. Back aboard the ship, Mara collapsed. The medics checked her. She was healthy, untouched, but she didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, her voice was cold, flat. "It's inside us now," she whispered. "It followed the call." Rourke frowned. "What did?" She looked up at him. Hope. And for the first time in his life, Admiral Rourke felt afraid of a single word, because in her eyes there was something new, something watching. Vigilance drifted silently through space, its engines humming low as it retreated from the imploded ruin of the alien station. Inside, the ship was quieter than it had ever been. No drills, no chatter. Just the low buzz of fear disguised as tension. Mara sat alone in the med bay, staring at her hands. They looked normal. No tremors, no burns, no sign of what she'd touched. But something felt wrong. Like her skin didn't fit right anymore. Like her bones were humming beneath the surface, echoing with voices that weren't hers. Across from her, Alvarez was filling out an incident report with fingers that trembled just enough to notice. He kept glancing at her like she might explode. She didn't blame him. Part of her felt like she might. Admiral Rourke stood behind the reinforced window of the med bay, watching her with the same intensity she'd seen in him during war briefings. He wasn't thinking of her as a person anymore. She could see it. She was a variable now. A threat. Maybe even a weapon. She didn't care. What haunted her more was what she had seen in that moment. The sphere, the knowledge, the thing that reached through time. It hadn't just touched her. It had chosen her, and it was still inside. The official UNSC protocol for alien contamination was clear. Full debrief, psychological screening, and quarantine. But this wasn't something you could scan with a medical wand. This was deeper, older. Rourke knew it. That's why, just 2 hours after extraction, he ordered the ship to cut off communication with Earth. No signals, no updates, not even a warning. He told the crew it was temporary. He lied. In the command deck, Rourke paced in front of the main display. Saito and Henders stood nearby, silent, armor still dusted with debris from the station. The ship's AI VALIS, flickered to life. "Admiral," it said, voice smooth and neutral, "your request to isolate internal communications has been completed. External transmissions have been blocked." "Good," he muttered. "I want this ship dark until I say otherwise." "Understood," Valis replied. Then, after a pause, "But may I ask, are you doing this to protect Earth or to protect her?" Rourke's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "Dr. Ellison," the AI continued. "Since her contact with the alien artifact, she has exhibited increased neural activity, approximately 217% above baseline. That level of cognitive acceleration is consistent with—" "Stop," Rourke growled. "No more scans without my order." Valis didn't reply, just dimmed. The Admiral rubbed his face. He hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. There was something gnawing at his gut, something worse than fear. It was uncertainty, and that was rare for him. He wasn't afraid of aliens. He wasn't afraid of war. He was afraid of what humanity might become if this thing got loose. In her quarters, Mara woke from a sleep that felt more like a coma. Her dreams had been vivid. No, real. She remembered stars exploding in slow motion. She remembered standing on Earth, only it wasn't Earth anymore. It was reshaped, red skies and towers made of bone. And humans were there, but different. Eyes glowing, smiling too wide. She rose slowly, walked to the mirror, and stared. Her reflection blinked a moment too late. She touched the glass. "Who are you?" she whispered, and the reflection smiled. Not her. The glass cracked. She stepped back, gasping, but when she looked again, it was fine. Normal. But something inside her was shifting, growing. She felt it like a tide rising beneath her skin. She didn't know what it was yet, only that it was awake. And it was no longer whispering. It was watching. Later that night, Rourke called an emergency meeting with the senior officers. The ship was off course, drifting steadily toward a binary star system. Nobody remembered setting the new trajectory. The navigation logs were wiped clean. "We need to consider that this ship is compromised," he said flatly. "Not by a virus, not by tech, by her." There was silence. Then Henders said what everyone else was too afraid to voice. "She's not human anymore." That word hung in the air like poison, and none of them argued. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the ship, beyond the crew's reach, the signal played again. A quiet pulse. Not a cry for help this time, but a beacon. A message to something older, waiting just beyond the edge of the galaxy. And far, far away, something turned its gaze toward the little blue ship. It had found what it needed. Humanity had arrived. But the stars would never be the same again. The change began small, subtle things. Lights flickering in patterns too rhythmic to be random. Doors opening a second before someone reached them. Engine vibrations pulsing like a heartbeat. Steady, growing stronger. Then came the voices. At first, only Mara heard them. Whispers in the back of her mind, like distant conversations in another room. She didn't tell anyone, not because she was afraid, but because a part of her was beginning to agree with them. The crew noticed her withdrawal. Mara stopped eating with them. She spent more time in dark corners of the ship, eyes unfocused, muttering things that didn't make sense. Equations, star charts, words that weren't English, words that didn't belong to any language at all. Valis tracked her movements. It kept logs, monitored her vitals. Then, without warning, Valis went offline. No alerts, no warning, just gone. The ship fell eerily silent, the kind of silence that felt like holding your breath just before a scream. Rourke stormed into engineering, demanding answers. The techs worked furiously, rewiring circuits, rebooting core systems. But there was no trace of malfunction. Valis hadn't crashed. It hadn't been hacked. It had shut itself off. Or worse, been overwritten. And that's when the lights went red. The emergency lighting painted the halls in a soft, crimson glow. It wasn't chaotic. It was calm. Too calm. Like the ship was preparing for something it already knew was coming. On the lower deck, Saito led a recon team to investigate the power core. They found it pulsing. Alive. Not with energy, but with consciousness. Thick black tendrils of semi-organic material had grown from the walls, fusing with the metal, curling around pipes and terminals. It looked like cancer, if cancer had intention. And at the center of it all was Mara, floating. Eyes closed, feet inches above the deck. Her hair drifted like she was underwater. Around her, whispers coiled in the air, vibrating through the metal. The team aimed their weapons, but none of them fired. They couldn't. Their fingers wouldn't move. Saito gritted his teeth, forcing one step forward. "Dr. Ellison, Mara, you need to come with us." Her eyes snapped open, but they weren't hers. Jet black, pupilless, reflecting nothing. Eyes that had seen galaxies die. She smiled softly. "You're too late." And then the screaming started. From every deck, crew collapsing to their knees, clawing at their ears, babbling nonsense or vomiting blood. Some convulsed, some just stopped breathing, staring blankly at ceilings like they'd been unplugged. Rourke sprinted to the command deck, barking orders. "Get us out of here! Emergency jump anywhere! Just move!" But the ship didn't respond. The engines roared, but they weren't under command. They were under hers. Mara walked calmly through the corridors now. The ship shifted around her, doors sliding open before her steps, walls pulsing with veins of light and shadow. She wasn't Mara anymore. She wasn't even human. She was something else wearing Mara's memories like a mask. Inside her, something ancient stirred, a fragment of the thing that had whispered from the station. Not the full being, no. Just a seed. But that was enough. Enough to turn vigilance into a weapon. Enough to begin reshaping matter, twisting space, sending out frequencies that the rest of the galaxy would soon hear. She reached the bridge, and Rourke was waiting. He held a pistol. She didn't stop walking. He aimed it between her eyes. "Whatever you are," he growled, "you're not getting to Earth." She smiled, pitying him. "You think this is about Earth?" He fired. The bullet never reached her. It stopped mid-air, crumbled into dust, and fell to the floor. "I'm not going to Earth," she said softly. "I'm going to warn it." And then the stars outside the viewport twisted, moved as if reality itself had flinched. A tear opened in space. Not a jump gate, not a wormhole, something new, something wrong. A doorway to the thing waiting on the other side. Something that heard the signal and was coming home. The tear in space widened, slow and deliberate, like an eye forcing itself open after a long sleep. No alarms sounded. No sirens blared. Vigilance didn't resist, because it couldn't. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was an extension of her. And she was no longer just Mara. She stood at the center of the command deck, arms raised, body trembling with energy. The crew who hadn't fled were either unconscious or already dead. Rourke lay slumped in the captain's chair, barely breathing, eyes wide with something deeper than fear, something closer to recognition. Because as the rift opened, he remembered. Not from books, not from records, from dreams. He'd seen this before, that shape in the dark sky, that twisting light. He'd dismissed those nightmares for years as stress from war, from grief. But they were memories. Planted. Prepared. Because the entity behind the signal hadn't just reached out recently. It had been watching humanity for centuries, seeding fragments of itself into the minds of those curious enough to look at the stars too long. And now, it had found a voice. Mara turned to Rourke. "You saw it too, didn't you?" she said, her voice layered, hers and something else beneath it, deeper, alien. "That's why you kept coming back to the stars. You couldn't explain it, but you felt it." He coughed, blood on his lips. "You think this is destiny?" Her head tilted. Number its selection? The rift pulsed again, and something stepped through. Not a ship, not a creature, a presence. It didn't have form, not yet. It shifted constantly like a silhouette underwater made of shadow and memory. But it had weight. Every molecule aboard the Vigilance felt it, like a gravity that bent thought itself. It pressed down on the human minds still clinging to consciousness. And it was curious, not about power, not about conquest. It wanted to understand what made humans so defiant, so resistant to becoming what others could not, so perfectly flawed. Mara approached it, eyes glowing like stars imploding. She didn't speak, not with her mouth. Her thoughts bled directly into its being. She offered it everything she knew: Earth's chaos, its wars, its heartbreak, its genius, its fire. And it listened. For a moment there was silence, and then laughter, low, shuddering, impossibly vast, not mocking, delighted. The entity didn't want to destroy humanity. It wanted to wear it, to become it. Because humans didn't just survive. They infected the universe with their will. They spread their rage, their love, their obsession to conquer every corner of the void. They weren't just another race of curious animals. They were a contagion of purpose. And the entity had found its host. Deep in the engine core, Henders and Saito fought their way through collapsing metal and fire, dragging Alvarez with them. Systems were failing, but the ship was still moving. Not toward any known destination, but toward something outside the map. They knew they had minutes, maybe less. "We have to blow the core," Henders said, panting, eyes wild. "We kill the ship, we stop her, we stop whatever the hell that is." Saito hesitated. "She was one of us." "No," Henders snapped. "She was. Now she's something else." They reached the core, only it didn't look like a reactor anymore. It was beating. A throbbing mass of alien tissue fused with steel, surrounded by a shell of rotating symbols, words not meant for human eyes. Looking at it made Saito's nose bleed. Alvarez was unconscious, breathing shallow. "I plant the charge," Henders said. "You get him out. But no time." Saito nodded once, then ran. Henders climbed into the pit, stepping over the pulsating veins, pressing the charge deep into the center. The countdown blinked to life. 60 seconds. He looked up, and for the first time, he saw Mara, or the thing that wore her, staring down through the ceiling's broken glass. She didn't stop him. She smiled, because she wanted him to try. As the core exploded, a shockwave tore through Vigilance, ripping bulkheads and flinging bodies like paper. But the rift didn't close. Instead, it fed. It grew, because pain was part of humanity, and it had just tasted sacrifice. The ship was gone. But something else remained. A flicker, a spark, a seed, drifting toward Earth. And Mara's voice echoed through space, across frequencies no machine could detect. "We are coming, and we are already here." Earth didn't notice it at first. The seed entered quietly, like dust slipping through a crack in a window. No explosions, no apocalyptic arrival from the sky, just a flicker on a few satellite sensors, shrugged off as static. A glitch in orbit, a solar flare maybe. But it wasn't. The seed was smarter than that. Patient, calculated. It had learned from its host, the way humans lied, waited, adapted. It didn't need to come crashing down in fire. It needed to be invited. Within hours, strange things began to happen. Small at first. A military AI in Eastern Europe began to rewrite its own code in a language no human had programmed it to know. It drew spirals in digital blue, fractals that pulsed like a warning, or a greeting. A child in Argentina painted a perfect replica of the alien rift using only her fingers and mud, something she had never seen, never been told about. A radio telescope in the Nevada desert started transmitting coordinates to a place in deep space that didn't exist on any star chart. And in Geneva, at the UNSC's highest security facility, a file labeled Vigilance Final Transmission appeared in the classified archives. No one put it there, and no one could delete it. Inside the file, a single sentence, looping in an audio file. "We brought something back." Rourke woke up in darkness. He didn't remember surviving the explosion, didn't remember the ship being torn apart. But he wasn't dead. He was somewhere. The ground beneath him was soft, like metal and flesh fused together. A low humming echoed all around. It felt like he was inside a heart, breathing. Then a light bloomed above him. Red and slow, a silhouette stepped forward. It was Mara, still wearing her form, but the being behind her eyes had fully awakened. "You're stronger than I thought," she said, crouching beside him. "Most minds snap. Yours bent." He tried to move, couldn't. "What do you want?" he croaked. She leaned in close. "To understand you, to become you. Humanity was never meant to survive this long, but you did. Not because of strength, not because of peace." She smiled. "You endured because of your refusal to accept your place in the universe. You never bowed. You broke it open." He stared at her. "So that's it? Possess us? Erase us?" Her smile faltered. "Number, we don't erase. We evolve. You will become more." He spat blood. "We'd rather burn." She stood. "You already did. Look at your history, your wars, your greed, but now you'll burn brighter." Behind her, the space around them peeled open. It wasn't a location. It was every location. Earth, Mars, the station, a billion futures branching into one. And at the center of them all, humanity, changed. Eyes glowing, voices layered, emotions like storms. Rage, love, memory, weaponized. No longer prey, no longer predators. Transcendence. "Earth will resist," Rourke said. "They always do." "I'm counting on it," she replied. Back on Earth, chaos brewed beneath the surface. World leaders received the same encrypted message simultaneously. It had no origin. It simply said, "Prepare." Then power grids failed across 4 major cities. Satellites stopped responding, and the skies began to hum. Not loudly, not yet. But it was building. In research labs and war rooms, scientists and generals studied the data, trying to make sense of it. But there was no logic, no math, no pattern. Because what was coming wasn't technology. It was will. Alien, human, merged. And somewhere, in a cold, quiet hospital, a baby was born. She didn't cry. She looked up at the nurse with pitch-black eyes and whispered a word no one understood. "Arrival." It began at 3:17 a.m., Earth Standard Time. No one could say where the sound came from. It wasn't heard with ears. It was felt. Low and heavy, like the air had thickened, like the planet itself had taken a breath and was holding it. In New York, dogs howled in unison. In Cairo, clocks stopped. In Tokyo, digital billboards glitched, displaying symbols no human had programmed. Above Earth, in low orbit, hundreds of satellites turned, on their own, to face a single point in space. The place where vigilance had vanished. The rift opened again. Wider this time. This wasn't a message. This was entry. From the dark, something stepped forward. Not a ship, not a being, but an idea given shape. A form that changed as you looked at it. Human to one, monstrous to another. A god, a ghost, a reflection of what each feared most. It wasn't here to conquer. It didn't need to. Humanity was already changing. The first transformation happened in a lab beneath the Swiss Alps. Dr. Elena Voss, a linguist who had never stepped into a battlefield, collapsed at her desk. When she woke, she spoke 6 unknown languages fluently, languages not from Earth. She wrote formulas that bent physics, and she couldn't stop smiling. By noon, 3 more awakenings were recorded. Students, soldiers, scientists, all of them tied to locations that had received fragments of the vigilance signal. By sunset, that number had grown to hundreds. Some were gifted with knowledge, some with power, and some with nothing but the voice. The one that whispered in their dreams, telling them of what was to come, what they must become. In the United Nations Security Council, panic reigned. Earth's greatest powers, nuclear-armed, AI-shielded, spacefaring, were helpless. Their systems betrayed them. Their satellites refused commands. Their weapons disarmed themselves. And above all, the question echoed. What is this? What have we become? The answer came not from space, but from Earth's own people. In a live broadcast hijacked across every global channel, Mara appeared. Her face was calm, eyes black, voice layered with something no longer bound to breath. "Do not fear," she said. "You are not being invaded. You are being redefined." Behind her, galaxies burned and reformed. Time unraveled. In the spaces between frames, some saw the end of everything. Others saw their own reflections staring back, smiling. "I was the first," she continued, "but not the last. You called it evolution. You called it madness. But this is the next step." She raised a hand. A single word passed her lips. "Awaken." And Earth did, not all at once. Some screamed, some knelt, some fought with everything they had, guns, code, prayer. But resistance didn't matter, because the change was already inside. Those exposed to the original signal, the researchers, the crew of vigilance, the ones who simply dreamed of stars, became carriers. It wasn't a virus, it was an idea, and ideas couldn't be killed. They could only be accepted or rewritten. The seed spread through thought, through belief, through fear, and as it did, humanity fractured. Those who embraced it became more, faster, smarter, terrifying in their empathy. They began to build machines that grew like trees, energy pulled from dimensions not yet mapped. And those who resisted? They watched their world transform, watched their friends, lovers, leaders become something other. Admiral Rourke stood alone at the edge of a ruined launch site in Kazakhstan, staring at the sky. The stars above twisted now, no longer fixed. Something moved among them. A new constellation, a new shape. He'd failed to stop it. But deep down, he wondered if it had ever been stoppable at all. Mara's voice returned to him in a whisper carried on the wind. "You tried to fight it. That's why I chose you. That's why you survived." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he felt peace, then pain, then clarity. And when he opened them again, they were black, the rift closed, but the transformation had begun. Humanity was no longer human. It was something greater, or something worse, depending on who survived long enough to define it. And far beyond Earth, in the endless dark, civilizations that had once mocked and ignored the strange, chaotic species from the blue planet began to tremble. Because they'd all heard the same thing. A message repeating across the stars. "We answered the call. Now it's your turn."